All right, we're almost getting started. Everybody gets settled. We still have people doing, well, first things I want to say is thank you for joining us this morning on the last day to listen to what the immersion community has to say. And what Brian and I are going to introduce is what the immersion reliability community has been doing over the last year and where we're going. We are a very new community. We've really only kicked off in the last year. So a lot of the last year has just been us understanding what needs to be done and then putting together the teams of people that are excited and engaged and committed to getting those things done. So my name is Samantha Yates. I am a principal engineer of quality and reliability at Intel, and I lead the immersion reliability community. And I would like to introduce my co-lead for the immersion reliability, Brian.
I'm Brian Kinkade. I'm the market development manager for FUCHS. We make immersion cooling fluids.
So the immersion reliability community, what is it that we're focused on? One, again, welcome. And I also want to take this time to recognize all of my work stream leads. So Puneeth, Bobby, Bo, and Betsy, can you please stand up and be recognized? These work stream leads have done an incredible amount of effort for the last year to get this committee kicked off. Again, we're starting from scratch. So I wanted to have the record. So if there's any work that we're talking about and that you want to have more information, please reach out to those individuals and have them talk to you about what they're doing, what help they need. We're doing something very high level and very superficial, but I am sure that they would be more than happy to talk to you about the details and how you can contribute to their individual efforts. So definitely this is the start of a conversation. It's not the end of the conversation. So what is it that the reliability community works on? Well, I want to be very clear. We don't own everything reliability. We focus specifically on what I call thermochemical quality and reliability. In the case of thermochemical quality, what I'm talking about here is specifically the material incompatibilities that adversely impact the performance of components and supporting materials within the systems that are immersed in the fluid, right? You know, now that we have all this IT equipment, and guarantee most of that IT equipment was not designed to be immersed. We have to understand those materials and their interactions with the fluids that we're immersing in. Once we understand that, then we move on to thermochemical reliability, which is the degradation of those components from those chemical reactions with the IT equipment and the fluid and the contamination within the tank over the service lifetime. So this committee really tries to understand the impacts of both of these aspects. And the first thing we have is a material compatibility work stream. And this is led by Puneeth from Shell and Bobby from Magnalytics, and they're specifically focused on evaluating the material compatibility of bulk materials across the fluid classes. And they're also working on standardization of testing methodologies, and they have a really good foundation. So if all of you have been in the immersion community, you know the fluids and material compatibility testing white paper, that falls under their committee. That white paper is currently in revision. So we're also looking at comparing reference tools for decision making and investigating post-age compatibility testing. So the work they're doing right now is to revise the existing white paper. So some of the key attributes, including chemical stability, physical integrity, electrical safety, operational reliability, have been included, but now what we want to do is to revise the existing white paper. Now that we have some feedback from the community, we want to expand our fluid coverage, start categories. We have many new fluids that have been introduced into the market since that paper was initially released, and we have to understand what are the similarities and differences and how do we understand the thermochemical compatibility of those different fluids across IT equipment and materials. Revisit some of the compatibility criteria, what works, what doesn't work, how do we help the community understand what the potential impact is of the degradation of their properties from the material compatibility testing. Is it a reliability risk or is it not? Is it just something that has to be understood? Update the test protocols. We have a lot of guidance on hydrocarbon fluids. We have a long way to go on fluorocarbons and two-phase, and we can definitely improve some of those test protocols that are out there. And enhance the decision tools. Again, understanding I see a degradation in the material property. Is it a reliability risk or not? What's my next step of testing? Again, if you're interested in helping revise this white paper, QR code, please reach out to that team. I'm going to have Brian talk about his component compatibility work stream.
Yeah, so Bo and I are running this component compatibility workstream, Bo from Oleon. And what we're focused on is instead of looking at individual materials and the fluids and how they're interacting. We're looking at the actual components that are going into an immersion system, the servers, the pieces that go onto the servers, and we like to break it down to look at each individual piece because everybody has their own sort of product acceptance criteria that they have for their component. So if you go to the next slide, what we're working on is we want to make sure that the products are going to work after they've been in the fluid or while they're in the fluid, and then we also want to make sure the fluid is not getting affected by the components. And so if you look at this slide, it actually explains the whole thing. You put your products into the fluid for a fluid soak, and there's different kinds of times that you could have. But when it comes out, you're going to look at it to make sure it looks okay and seems like it's going to operate okay, but you're actually going to run it through something probably similar to your product acceptance testing that you're doing already for air-cooled. And you also might do some other design validation testing that you do because you have a expected possible failure mode that you want to make sure isn't happening or isn't starting to happen or something else. Most of the time there's not an issue, but you want to make sure because it's going to go on a board later and go into a board that has to be reliable. And then on the same side for the fluid, we expect the fluid to be working fine after the soak, but we also want to make sure we're catching any of the contaminants that are maybe coming off of the component and contaminating the fluid so that we can see that and be ready to look at it in case we're doing any diagnostics later on, or so we understand what the actual is happening. Because in the end, everything that's going into this bath, we're not replacing the fluid all the time. So it's sitting there and it's gathering whatever contamination is occurring from whatever components are going into it. And that's what we're trying to gather all the information on. So we're looking for people to join us that supply the components, whether it's a NIC card, a cable assembly, disk, the actual motherboard manufacturers and server manufacturers. Any of those different components, we want to look at them individually and see how they work in the fluid before they go on into a server and go into a real reliability testing program. And so that's the main group of people that we're looking for, but we also have fluid and analytical chemists that that are in there to help us make sure we're doing the right kind of testing for the fluid contamination levels and the fluid performance.
Thank you, Brian. The work stream that Betsy and I are leading right now, and this is one that has very recently kicked off in about the last 6 months, is the thermochemical reliability. So now that we have compatibility, do we actually have a reliability risk? So this is an effort that both Betsy and I, and Betsy stand up and be recognized, have led. And what we're particularly interested in is, and this is a very, very rigorous effort because we thought we were going to split this a little bit between component reliability and server reliability, but Betsy and I are like, we're just going to do the whole thing. So we've given ourselves a pretty heavy lift, but I'm confident we can do it with the right partners. What we're trying to do is develop standardized thermochemical reliability test methodologies for IT hardware. So essentially, now that you have the hardware, you've passed your material compatibility, is it reliable? So one of the other things we're really interested in is all of us are doing various stages of reliability testing, or we have POCs in various stages. How do we aggregate all of that thermochemical reliability test data and failure modes from the OCP community so we can learn from each other? I'm a huge fan of learning from each other. Why do we all have to make the same mistakes over and over again? And then provide some recommendations on immersion requirements. What things are critical to consider in your design to ensure thermochemical reliability versus which things have some flexibility for those ODMs that are designing those components. So we also have a white paper in development, and this is a very high level overview of what we have, but what you can see that we did here is we decided to actually do multiple layers of integration for reliability. Not only are we going to address thermochemical reliability of server hardware components, but we're also going to do a single server and a rack. Now the methodologies to do the reliability testing, all those different layers of integration are slightly different, but we're going to try to just take it all on at one time. And essentially what that starts with is measure your T0 hardware performance. Does it work before you did anything, right? Does it meet your factory acceptance criteria? Soak it in the immersion fluid for an equivalent service lifetime. Now I recognize that is a big black box for most of you that are not reliability engineers, and there are multiple ways to get to an equivalent service lifetime. But that's something that we're really trying to work with within a community is, can we aggregate multiple different ways so that there is some flexibility within the community on how you address an equivalent service lifetime. You then measure the hardware performance after the soak. Did it degrade? Did you see a degradation? And determine if you see a performance degradation, was that impactful? Do you have a reliability risk? So some of the big gaps we have right now is we have a lot of fluid chemists, we have a reliability engineer, we have some component vendors, but what I'm really missing is server system engineers and data center end users. Now, I've done enough server level testing to be dangerous, but I certainly don't know everything, and so I'm really looking for some true server system hardware engineer experts to come in and join us to say, as we develop some of these methodologies, does it work? Is it something that you can actually do in the real world, or is it something that we have to modify to make it more approachable for ODMs to actually use? Another exciting collaboration has just really come together in the last, I would say, 3 days, and this is one of the benefits of these conferences, these global conferences, is that we were all capable of sitting down and making this happen, because we've been talking about this effort for about 6 months. So one of the biggest questions I get is, okay, you have all this contamination. I think I've shown over the last couple of years, you have contamination in these tanks. Is it a reliability risk? And I'm like, well, I don't know. I don't have any data. I know that I've seen the effects if you go off the cliff, but I don't know where the limits are. I know what's good and I know what's bad. I don't know where the limits are, which makes it difficult to do things like reliability requirements, right? So one of the things that we've started is, how do we collaborate within this OCP community with industry and academia to try to get some of these foundational science questions answered? So we just kicked off this effort, and it's just been approved, where we're going to work with the University of Texas Arlington and Professor Aganoff's fantastic immersion lab with our partners from ExxonMobil, Shell, and Magnalytics to really understand copper corrosion potential due from contaminants that induce corrosion in immersion fluids. What are the limits? What are the potential effects? So we're going to go through a process where we basically dope fluids and say, what are the contamination limits to induce copper corrosion? Then what are the surface interface or electrical resistance degradation due to in copper susceptible or corrosion susceptible fluids due to contamination? And then we're going to do some level of component and system level validation to say, hey, do we see a component and system degradation if you have a fluid that is now corrosion susceptible? So this is a huge effort. I want to say that this is only possible due to the collaboration across this OCP community. I am so excited about getting some of this foundational data done. And I want to say that there's still a lot of opportunity for OCP members to contribute to this project. So if you are interested in this effort and the data and some of the first things that we're going to learn, please reach out to myself, Ivneet Banga. Ivneet, are you around? Ivneet, who's the research associate that is actually directing this work. So please reach out to us and say, and we'll be more than happy to talk to you about how you can help this effort and really start contributing to the foundational science. I also want to say, call to action, I need contributors. These are my 3 work streams. Please, if you are interested in contributing, join our mailing list. We will be updating our mailing list, our meeting invites after about 2 weeks after OCP. We're going to go out and we're going to set up all our meetings again. So everybody here who has joined, you will get a new meeting invite and we will kick off. We had some leadership shifts, so some of the meetings, the contributors that have been working for a while, you're like, hey, those meetings, it's going to be solved and resolved about 2 weeks after the conference. We're just waiting for everybody to sign up and set out a new fresh batch of invites for these meetings. Again, I want to thank you, and I want to thank you for my core team of Thermochemical Reliability Immersion community. We are small but mighty. We're trying to get a lot done, and I'm hoping to grow. So thank you. Did I make it? All right, anybody have any questions with the last 2 minutes? You have no idea how proud I am that I made it. Oh, come on, guys, you got a question.
So if there's no questions, I have a question for the audience, and I'd love to hear exactly, how do you estimate your equivalent service lifetime? That's going to be my new conversation starter, which will probably not lead to many continued conversations.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the questions. As a reliability engineer, I can tell you many ways to get to an equivalent surface lifetime. What I need to hear from the community is, of those methodologies, what works for the industry? What is a capability we need to build and what is outside of the envelope of what we can do right now and what we have to build the expertise to do. So that's why we need to hear from the community. I can give you lots of ways. I've done it. I've been doing this now for 3.5, 4 years, doing reliability testing at the component, the server, and at the rack level. But at the same time, I recognize that Intel have had resources that are not available to many people. So how do we modify? How do we build? But that's why I need to hear from the community is what can we do now and what do we have to grow?
If anybody has any thoughts, we got a few minutes.
There's you.
First of all, I want to thank you guys. This is really great. I also want to thank companies like Exxon, Shell, all of them.
Oh, you need to, there you go.
Yeah, I also want to thank companies like Exxon and Shell who've been visiting our lab, and we spent some time together, and HF Sinclair and so on. So I think this is a great time. We're ready to go, and want to thank IVNet as well. You acknowledged there. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. And don't worry, you're not, you'll be hearing more from me next.
All right.
Thank
Enjoy.
you, Brian.